We are in Daniel chapter 3. Not going to read the whole chapter, but we'll read a few extra verses. And we'll see that the three men we'll be discussing here, they're showing their allegiance to Christ. And the lesson kind of starts off and talks about people and things that they would declare their allegiance to, whether it be their job, their family, or their favorite sports teams. Those are things that sometimes people put above God. And I want to read something if I can find it. Didn't plan on this, but it just hit me here. Speaking about people and jobs, a lot of times people put their jobs over God because they're chasing money or they're chasing a position or something they think that is going to benefit them in the long run. But we know when our life ends, none of those things are going to matter. And I've told myself I'm going to put this on a frame and put it in my office. And I don't know who said it, but I screenshotted it. It says, if you died tonight, your employer would advertise to fill your job role by the end of the month. But your loved ones, chosen family, and friends would miss you forever. Don't get too busy making a living that you forget to make a life. And, that there's nothing biblical in that quote, but it's something to think about, whether it be a job or anything. Our full devotion needs to be to Christ and glorifying Him. And talking to our family, talking to our friends and our co-workers about Him. And what we'll see here in this lesson today is that Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, they're put with, are you going to worship these false gods, these statues here, or are you going to stand with Christ? And we may not deal with that in, that exact sense, but we do deal with it in a spiritual sense of when people ask us how we're going to stand on something, are we going to compromise our views? And ultimately, as Christians, we need to have the faith to stand with Him, knowing that He's going to provide and not forsake us. A lot of reading here before we get into the verses. It kind of lays the ground, talking about Daniel chapter 2. It says, in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, he had a dream, and the dream troubled him so much that he lost sleep over it. And the king told his advisors, wanted all the folks to come in, the wise guys, to interpret the dream, and it says he would reward them. However, if they couldn't perform the task, they would all be put to death. So imagine you're some of those guys, and Nebuchadnezzar says, come interpret this dream. If you can interpret correctly, boom, I'm going to reward you. There's no in between. If you don't interpret it right, you're gone. You're dead. It says Daniel and his friends were included in that list to be executed. But Daniel prayed, and it says, during the night the Lord revealed Nebuchadnezzar's dream to Daniel and provided him with the interpretation of that dream. So let's read what that dream was about. So it sets up chapter 3 here so we know what we're reading about. It says, Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar the meaning of the dream. And in that dream there was a great statue. And the statue was divided into various parts. And the first part was a head made of gold. The second section was the chest and arms made of silver. And the third portion was its belly and thighs formed of bronze. The fourth segment was legs and feet made of iron and clay. Then a rock broke from a mountain and crushed the statue. Daniel informed the king that the various sections represented the various kingdoms of the world. Each of these kingdoms would succumb to the next. And in the end, God would overthrow the course of history with His own kingdom that no man would be able to stand against. And God's kingdom would endure forever. So I know Joey can probably get deeper just on, if we want to talk about those few verses, that one chapter, and he can probably tell you a lot more than I can tell you. But in short there, what Nebuchadnezzar is being told is, you're just one kingdom. There's going to be many kingdoms that come after you, buddy. But overall, God's going to endure. He's going to destroy everything on this earth, right? He's going to come back and set up His kingdom. Because the kingdoms in the way y'all are ruling isn't glorifying Him. You've got your own false gods. You've got your own ways of doing things. And you're just a fragment of time. And that's kind of how we are. We're just here for a short amount of time. So the way we spend that time, we need to use it wisely. And overall, we know these things. We know that God's going to rule forever. But imagine you're Nebuchadnezzar, and that's what Daniel tells you. But interestingly enough, it doesn't really frustrate him. He kind of is wild that, wow, okay, well, you definitely interpreted that dream pretty good. So says he's going to make him the ruler over the whole province of Babylon. It says Daniel requested that the king appoint Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to manage the province of Babylon. So just like even in our times today, Daniel wants his folks put in positions, right? So they're kind of set up. But we're going to see that Nebuchadnezzar gets very mad with them too very quickly here. So going on, getting straight into the verses, Daniel chapter 3, let's read verse 14 and 15. It says, Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, the flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if you worship not, you shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? So we see here he's telling them, you're either going to worship my gods, keyword there, gods. They're worshiping not just one. You're going to worship this statue, this idol, or you're going to be thrown into a fire. So it says, there were some folks that reported them, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But obviously they weren't dedicated, it says, to the ways of the Babylonians. So we know who they're serving. We know they're standing with Daniel. We know they're serving Christ. And they're not going to do things the way these Babylonians did it. And we know just by what Nebuchadnezzar says, they're gods. So they had hundreds of gods. It says, So Nebuchadnezzar would not have cared if the three men would have worshipped the Lord as well. However, refusing to bow to the golden image constituted public disobedience. And think about that. We know with any king, they don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to be told they're going to do something, and then they don't follow it. So if those guys, if they would have said, we serve Christ, but we'll worship your gods, he would have probably had no big deal with it, right? Because they're already worshiping so many gods, they probably can't keep count of them. But really, think about this. It's how a lot of, and I mean this, I think there's a lot of true believing Christians that act that way because they don't want to disrupt the peace. We hear of our governments and all these times having faith-like conferences and all this where they all come together. We know our God's a jealous God. And we know multiple times all throughout here he tells us there's one way, right? There's only one way to heaven. And, we understand we live in a world where there's these other religions, but that don't mean we commingle and mix with them and just say everything's okay. And that's what they would have been doing here if they would have compromised to that and said, well, okay, we really believe in Christ, but we'll do what you say. That's not what Christ calls us to do. We're called to plant so many seeds and try to lead people to Him and let them understand that when we come into contact with those people, we need to respectfully say, you know what, I don't view that way. I don't believe that way. Here's the way I believe, and you're welcome to do that. But that's not the right way. That's not what's going to get you to heaven. And we're going to lose friends along the way. We'll lose jobs. People will get mad at us and say, well, they have the right to do it. Yeah, anybody. I mean, if you want to, you've got free will to choose that. But there's ultimately going to be an end date that you'll see what that choice got you. But what does that verse go back and say? It says, the king posed a rhetorical question. Who is that God? They shall deliver you out of my hands. It says, Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful man on earth at the time, thought he knew the answer to the question he posed, that no God could save them. Now think about that. So he's asking him this. So to me, in my mind, it tells me he didn't even truly believe in his God's power. Because he's asking them, what God, what type of God is going to save you from me throwing y'all in a fire? Who's going to do that? So he doesn't even have his own belief in his own gods that could happen, right? So we see that he's somebody that's kind of lacking a little bit of faith there. Reading verse 16 through 18 here, it says, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. So, in Polk County Talk, they literally just said, not going to happen, throw us in there. You know, we're not going to worship him. We're not going to worship what you got here. And I want you to think, you know, a lot of times, us Christians, and especially when we're talking to a lost person, we like to, in our own heads, put these guys in the Bible are above us, that they lived better lives than us and things. And that's not true, you know, to some extent. Yeah, some of them were great guys, but they all fell short. But where I'm trying to go on this, I do think a lot of times that people in this time have a lot more faith than we do. Because, you know, I'm standing here, and I can say it, but right now, if we set ourselves on fire, I'm not saying do that, or we got thrown in a furnace, do we have the faith to believe that God is going to be right there with us and not let us burn up? Do we have that faith? Because they did. They straight said it. They said if we get thrown in there, whether, you know, we die or whether we believe in him, we've got faith. So I think sometimes I wish that I had faith that strong. And I pray that we all could work on our life to where we do have that strong of faith. You know, having that faith just the size of a mustard seed to move a mountain, you know. Go ahead, Mr. Schmuck.
Yeah, when you said that, I think it's one of the great verses in the Bible is 18. But if not, be it known unto thy O king, we will not serve thy God. So it didn't matter if they died or not.
Right.
And that was really important in that talking about faith. It wasn't about their lives. It was about worshiping God, and it was all about God. And if you look at it, what a statement of faith. If not, it didn't matter to them. You know,
right.
Many of us would say that.
And you know, like you said there, so they understand, hey, my God's either going to save me when you throw me in there, or my God's going to save me when I leave this world, and I'm going to be okay. You know, they have that type of faith. I equivalate it. You know, sometimes we hear when somebody's had a bad diagnosis from a doctor, you know, obviously we all know that God, he can do any miracle he wants. But at the same time, you know, sometimes people will end with that remark, and it don't bother me when people say this because I know their heart and what they're meaning. But they say, you know what, and if not, if that person does die, you know, and they know God, it's all right. And sometimes that's not the most comforting thing you hear, but it's true. If you're a believer and, you know, you leave this earth, whether it be cancer, whether it be some other sickness or something crazy, you know, if you believe in God, it's all okay. In reality, it's better than being here. Sometimes that's hard for us to accept, but it is. Talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it says they had already decided how they would respond if they ever faced the question of where their allegiance lay. You know, they had their mind made up before the question was ever posed. Because you got to think, they knew, you know, the culture they were living in, so they probably were prepared at some point they were going to have to answer something like that. They may not been ready to get told, you know, you're going to be bound up and thrown in a fire, but they were ready to say, we're standing with God. It said they declared that their devotion to God would remain steadfast whether they were delivered or martyred. Again, we're either going to be saved, he's going to help us out of that fire, or we're going to be saved when we die and we're not having to worship your statue. Not going to happen. It says God can glorify himself through people's sufferings and even death for the sake of his name. Faithful believers maintain their allegiance to God in the most difficult of circumstances, trusting him with the outcome. You know, we've seen nothing yet in our time what we think of suffering. We think we may have it bad, or you know, we see things happening in the news and all, but when you look at other countries or parts of the world or the things that's even happening here, right now we're just putting the gas in the vehicle. We hadn't even cranked it up to what's really going to happen here in the years to come, because I say this all the time, you can't be straddling the fence. You're either with us or you're against us, and that's not a challenge, or that's not, it's just, it is what it is. You either believe in God or you don't. There's no in between. You know, when people, I think there's people that, quote unquote, people will say they're good people, or I didn't really believe in God, but I didn't really have anything against Christians. I just did my own thing. Well, when they appear before God, There's not going to be, well, you were in between, so I'm going to let you stay down here for a little bit, then you can come up with us. That's not the way it's going to work. You either believe in him or you don't. Going on to verse 19, it says, Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury. Think about it. He just got told in public right there. He's not going to let these guys say that to him. He's got to be, I'm the king. I got to show you what I can do. It says, And the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 17 times more than it won't be heated. Basically saying, we're about to crank the heat up on this thing like it's never been cranked up before. It says, And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound in the midst of the burning fiery furnace. So if we just stopped at those verses and said, we're done with this lesson, that last verse, you think, oh, well, everything's done. They burn up too. But that's not it. But that's where the book stops here, just for the little analysis. But again, so the furnace has been cranked up. And, I was burning the other day, and, you burn leaves and think that gets hot. Just think, if you jumped in a fire of leaves burning, you're going to come out with some bad burns. Could die. But think that this fire right here, we probably can't even comprehend how hot this fire was to be. It literally tells us that the guys throwing them in there, that you think they're not getting in the fire, they're just throwing them in there, that it consumed them. So this is hot. It burns them up. It says, the more frightening he could make their execution, the more likely he could expect total compliance with his decrees. Again, think about a king. Most rule with an iron fist, right? They want to make examples and show this is what's going to happen if you betray me. So he's showing, if you don't worship the gods here that we do, well, here's what's to happen. Going on, it says, if we face persecution and opposition in whatever form, we must remember that Jesus warned his followers to expect this. And read you a verse here it references John 16, verse 2. We've probably heard these. They shall put you out of the synagogues, yet the time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God's service. So there's coming a time, and we're told here, that people are going to think that they're doing a service by getting rid of us Christians. And to their own, I guess, fault, maybe they are. But in really, they're just fulfilling out Scripture. So they're doing probably the opposite of what they think that they want to do. Again, we know that's coming. We know it'll be family, it'll be friends. People will throw us up when the time comes when they want to live, when they're faced with the choice. But when it comes to us Christians, when we're faced with what's to come, and we're told that, hey, it's either you tell us you don't believe in Christ, or you worship our God, or you're dead. We need to have that faith. You say, Connor, you're throwing us up to literally, basically, be a martyr. Well, not necessarily be a martyr. I'm just telling you to do what God tells us to do and believe on Him. Let's not reject Him when that time comes, and let's have that faith. Because you know what? If I leave this earth today, there's a better end for me. I ain't got to live here no longer. Believe me, I want to be with Kelson. I want to be with my son. But in reality, it's better to be up with God than it is to be down here. Now, I believe that there's no sadness at all in heaven. So I have this kind of mindset that there's no, obviously, we hear people say, well, they're looking down at it. They're not. There's no sadness. So I don't know how. I can't tell you this, but I don't. It's just a God thing. My memory's gonna be wiped of what's down here when I'm up there with Him. It's not gonna be I'm missing my brother or my sister. It's gonna be I'm glorifying God and I'm here with you, God, and that's how we got to look at it. But the world doesn't want us to think that way. The world is gonna say to us, are you going to leave behind, all what's right here just to say you believe in some God? Yeah, I pray that I have that strength. I pray that I'm going to do that. I've never had a gun to my head or something like that yet, but I pray that I will have that strength. And the minute I leave this earth, I'm with him. Going on, verse 24, it says, Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. So boom, his guys, his strongest of strong, has died, throwing Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fire. And he thinks, man, am I hallucinating here? I'm seeing 4 people in that fire, and none of them's dead. None of them's consumed. So, it says Jewish scholars assert that the 4th person in the fire was an angel. It says Bible scholars, evangelical Bible scholars, interpret like the Son of God is referring to Christ, and he was present with the 3 men in the fire. I believe that. I can't answer how, but God in some form, way or another, in my opinion, was with them in that fire. It says the fire that had taken the lives of the mighty Babylonian soldiers was harmless to these 3, right? So think about this. It's the same fire. I mean, the fire didn't change for the guys that throwed them in there. Same fire, but there's a difference there. One's had belief and faith in him and knew what was going to take place, or that he would be there, and the other group didn't. And to me, this is just a Connor, analysis. I'm not saying this is a biblical analysis, but to me, it's kind of symbolic of what's to come. At the end of life, did you believe in God or did you not? One's going to burn, and one's not. And the lost world looks at us, and right now, if somebody's watching, man, I know Connor. I work with Connor. He's a nice guy, but he's saying some rough stuff up there. He's saying if you don't believe in Christ, you're going to burn. Yeah. Connor's not saying that. The Bible's saying that, and I'm telling you what the Bible says. And I believe the Bible. We all talk about this. Well, at some point in time, we've read a verse, and it really means that, look, this ain't a Connor Bible, a Joey Bible, an Autumn Bible. It's the Bible. Right. And it may say things that we necessarily not want to, take hold of and say, yeah, that's right. But it is. Everything in the Bible is right. It's not about whether we agree with it or disagree with it. We should agree with every bit of it if we're a Christian, right? We need to follow it. But verse 26, it says, Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth and out of the midst of the fire. But I want to keep reading there. I don't know why it don't finish out the chapter there. So hold on one second. We'll finish it out. All right, so it ends on 26. Keeping on, 27. And the princes, governors, and captains of the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. So in short, they got thrown in that fire, and it was like nothing. It was like nothing ever happened. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So a lot of people too, I've heard this before, and I was reading stuff. A lot of people take as when he takes them out of this fire that immediately, he became a believer right there. But then again, it don't go this in our book. But if you read in verse 28, he says, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So immediately right there tells me he wasn't a believer right then. He just thought, well, man, they're God. But it doesn't, again, I think he would have said, our God, my God, if he became a believer at that minute. It said, Who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any God except their own God. Still, he's calling it their God. Nebuchadnezzar says, verse 29, Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Again, the lesson is about having allegiance to our God, right? And one of the little highlights that it has here at the end of the lesson is that we can expect non-believers to take extreme actions of persecution against us. Again, I can't tell you if this is 2 years from now, 10 years from now, 100 years from now, but I can tell you that just think back 2 years ago, 2020, would you think we'd be in the world we're in today? So it could be very quickly. We're seeing things happen quick. But let's just talk about it in today's time. Let's not think about, we've got somebody telling us we're getting thrown in a fire. Let's think of it as we have somebody saying, look, there's a big bonus, there's a big position here that we've got, but I need to tell you, I know you're a big Christian, I know you post things out there on your social media, I know you're active in talking about Christ at work, but when you get in this position, you can't do that. You going to do it? Or are you going to say, you know what? It's better for me in my life to say, nope, I don't need that. I got God. He's going to take care of me. I know, I feel confident that I would do that I could turn down a job. I tell myself I feel confident when somebody has a gun to my head that I'm going to do that. It's a little easier said than done saying that, though. But I can tell you that 7 years ago when I had written a speech for a graduation at a college around here, they was like, we don't know if you need to say that, about God. Maybe take that out. I didn't. So, but that's the world we're living in, that, we're going to have to understand that there's going to be, in reality, worldly material goods that we ain't going to have, which is absolutely fine when we say we believe in Christ. And that's what, we need to do as Christians is pray for one another that we have that strength. Because, we may be saying, well, no, I'm not going to have that. I'm not, I'm retired, or, I don't have anywhere. I'm my own boss or something like that. But, ultimately, when one Christian compromises, it affects every one of us. Right. It's like losing somebody on your team. You think about it. It's not about quantity. If there's one Christian in here or 5,000 Christians in here, God can use us however He wants. But still, it's the thought and the principle. You want as many people on our team as possible. And if people start falling away, that's just not what we need. So we need to be praying for one another, praying for our pastor, praying for our church, and not just saying it while we're here, but ultimately, the challenge isn't coming in here saying these things, Right now, we feel protected, right? It's when we're out in the world the other 5 or 6 days of the week, what are we doing? Who are we coming into contact with? So let's just, like the lesson says, let's be more allegiant to God and only Him. And basically, anything else that comes before us, just say, nope, it's either Him or nothing. Anybody got anything?
I got tickled at my little mother-in-law yesterday. She's funny. Any of y'all that's ever been around her, she's real funny anyway. And she's been going through breast cancer. And they did surgery, supposedly got it all, but she's had 3 doctor's appointments this week. Just like bam, 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 like 5 the week before. Giving her all these options, radiation pill, take some radiation treatments, do this, do that. And yesterday, Camille Autumn was there talking to her. She said, the cancer don't even bother me at all. She said, I'm not the least bit worried about having cancer. She said, the Lord's either going to heal me or He's going to take me home. She said, but these appointments are about to drive me crazy.
I heard something this week too where the pastor said, well, make sure that you're saved. He goes, you don't want to be the most righteous person in hell. Maybe you want to be, you don't want to be the most wicked person in heaven, but you'd rather be the most wicked person in heaven that was saved than the most righteous person in hell. And he says, when we think about that, that gets away from our self-righteousness. And it's about me. But there's people like that out there. They think, I do this, I do that, I do this. Therefore, God's going to accept me. I think so much of the world is that way. Because everybody that dies if you ever hear on the radio, Joe so-and-so died, he must, the wicked man in the world, you know, they go, wonder if he's looking down from heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, they do that 24/7, no matter who dies, they're looking down from heaven.
Yep.
You know, Connor, when we was talking about the people that were responsible for 9/11, they all felt like they were doing God a favor. We're talking about, they felt like they were, it wasn't an evil thing to them, that was a great thing in their mind.
Yep.
To kill
To
the Zionists, they call them, you know.
And you know, it's not funny saying this, is being serious as possible, but you know, you think about like that in their minds within an instant, you know, they realize, bam, I wasn't right. I learned right now. But you know, you make me think about using cancer as an example. You think about Nebuchadnezzar throwing them in the fire. All human mind tells us if I, you know, put my hand on an oven or something, or I get around fire, I'm going to get burnt, you know. And if I put something in a fire like that and it came out, literally tells us not even singed, no ash, didn't smell, I, in my mind, would say, whatever that was, I believe, right? And you think about a doctor, you know, you'll hear, you know, you get a doom and gloom report and they say, you know, 99%, we don't see this. Then a miracle happens and the person lives. Sometimes, you know, I don't know, but it's like a doctor may have a respect. Oh, well, you know, this is just a scientific, you know, this doesn't happen. But it's like, how, when you know something like that shouldn't happen and it does, how do you not believe? I don't know.
I wasn't in here when y'all asked for prayer requests, but several of y'all know my Aunt Frances, Stephen Aunt Frances, you know, he died a couple of years ago with cancer. She's been having a headache, and they've been put out a couple of times, couldn't get rid of it. They finally did a CAT scan, and she's got an aneurysm 3 times the size of any that this doctor's ever seen. So he's sending her to a specialist. They should have called her Friday, they didn't, so they'll probably call her Monday. But she told me, she said, I want your little church to pray. She said, I've met them, and she said, I'm not being picky, but I know that y'all know God. She said, I'm not scared to go, but she said, I got kids, and I got grandkids. And she said, I know y'all know how to pray.
Let's remember that. All right. Mr. Funk, you want to close us?
Again, dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the lesson. We pray that we can learn from it, Lord. Your word is there so we can learn to be closer to you. Thank you for the lesson. Pray for all these on the prayer request. Be with Pastor this next hour. And pray that the Holy Spirit would work through him, that he would speak the word that we need today to edify